Senator Dick Durbin touted the accomplishments of the Biden administration on the Senate floor Tuesday. Durbin first noted that the price of gasoline is lowering after hitting an all-time national high earlier this summer. The Illinois Democrat said that to, quote, write this administration off as unproductive is to ignore the obvious. In recent months, Congress has passed the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Honoring Our Pact Act. Democratic lawmakers have been touting their legislative victories as midterms approach in November.
Mr. President,
Senator from Illinois.
good news to report to my colleague from the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Gallon of gasoline on the way to the airport this morning, $3.46 a gallon. I wish it were lower, but we've made progress from the days when it was over $5. We're moving in the right direction. And incidentally, this president has created more jobs than any president in a similar period in the history of the United States. Do we have challenges? You bet we do. But to write this administration off as unproductive is to ignore the obvious. We came out of this pandemic, and when we did, we faced the problems that nations around the world were facing. Literally, could we deal with inflation? Demand was pent up, and it overwhelmed the services and goods that were available, and inflation started to rise. It took its toll, and still does, on American families. But to ignore what we've been able to do is to really turn our backs on reality. What about that rescue plan, the American Rescue Plan? I remember it, and I remember there wasn't a single Republican voting for it. Almost 20% of the American Rescue Plan went to state and local governments to deal with issues like crime, to make safer streets and safer neighborhoods for Americans across the board. That's the kind of money well spent. And yet the Republicans wouldn't give us a single vote, and you heard the senator from Kentucky deriding it at this moment as a waste of billions of dollars. It's money well spent, and I found out personally, firsthand, when I went back in my state over the August recess. I didn't just confine myself to the blue areas of the state, and there are big ones and big part of our state, and I'm happy to visit there. I went to some of the redder sections of our state, the areas that voted for Donald Trump in the last election over Joe Biden. I don't do particularly well there either, but I wanted to visit with them, and I felt that there were things I needed to learn about what families and communities were facing. I went to Herrin, Illinois, the southern part of our state, where my family has its roots. And I went to the Southern Illinois Healthcare, which is a major healthcare consortium serving most of downstate Illinois, rural, small-town America, struggling with providing professional medical care, but doing a fine job. We have something called congressionally directed spending now, used to be known as earmarks. I'm unapologetic about it. I believe that if you make a public disclosure of these earmarks, to justify them, taxpayers understand this is federal money being brought home from Washington to their states and communities where it's needed. So I went to Herrin, Illinois, where we were able to announce an earmark of $1 million, which is going to provide for about half the cost of a new physical rehab facility. Critically important. I met some interesting people there. I met a little fellow, 4 years old, who was a victim of cerebral palsy. His name was Maverick. Maverick had a big smile on his face, was there at the rehab center to introduce me to the nurse that's been working with him. Strong, courageous little fellow, the pride of his family, the kind of courage he's showing. Now he has a rehab facility that is world-class in his region, in his neighborhood. The alternative, drive to St. Louis. You hear that over and over again in that part of the state. We just don't have it here. We have to drive to St. Louis. When it comes to rehab services for Maverick, kids like him and adults as well, they now have a fighting chance to get something local. And let me add, another fellow was there with the name of Riley Baird. Riley's a high school student, and he's an amazing kid himself. He's a Boy Scout, and I used to be a Boy Scout a long, long time ago. He had that sash with all the merit badges on it. I think I had 5 of them when I finally quit. He must have had 50, maybe 100. He had them all on his way and passed as an Eagle Scout. He decided to make that rehab clinic his project. He and his family built some toys that the kids are using there. and he was there to accept the recognition and praise he deserved. He has a brother named Corbin, twin brother named Corbin, also an Eagle Scout, who picked a different charity to provide help to. And I just want to say, for anybody who's despondent about the future of this country, you ought to meet Corbin and Riley Baird. Those two young men are going to be leaders, I'm sure, in their community and beyond. And it reminded me, too, that we ought to take a look at the positive things that are coming about. This notion of the reconciliation bill not serving America is ignoring the obvious. How many of us in the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, have had press conferences, put out campaign ads talking about the cost of prescription drugs? Guess what? We finally did something about it. After all these years and all these headlines and all these brochures and all these ads, we finally did something. The reconciliation bill, which passed the United States Senate without a single Republican vote, without one, will finally address the cost of prescription drugs for people on Medicare. And it starts reaching beyond that to say the pharmaceutical industry has to be responsible. They've never been able to defend or explain why the same drugs, exactly the same drugs made in America, are charged in Canada for a fraction of what people have to pay in this country. Why Americans have to go without, while in other countries there are discounts that allow families to afford the drugs they need to be healthy and to live. Well, we've done something about it. We passed a bill that'll make a difference. And when we talk about issues like electricity, I'm going to brag a little bit here. My wife and I decided 2 or 3 weeks ago to start producing electricity. We bought solar panels for our roof in Springfield, Illinois. We're not the first family to have them, but we're one of the few. I predict that's going to change in a hurry. Why? Because in that reconciliation bill, we started taking an honest look at what it takes to reduce climate change and to give our kids a planet they can live on. It means that each of us has to change our lifestyle some. Well, I left this morning, a little bit of sunshine in Springfield, Illinois, and it means that I'm producing electricity with the local utility. I'm going to try to do even more. My wife and I are devoted to showing, at least setting an example in this region, in this area. The bill we passed in reconciliation is going to create incentives for people to put solar panels on their homes, to buy heat pumps, electric water heaters, things that will reduce the use of fossil fuels and instead move us toward a more electric economy. And yes, automobiles are headed in that direction too, and it didn't take a federal mandate. The major car producers are headed that way whether we like it or not. They understand where we need to go as a country and where the consumers are headed. And I think that's a good indication as well. So, Mr. President, when I hear the Republican leader come to the floor and say that things are so awful, I don't doubt that many families are struggling, and we should be sensitive and mindful of that every single day. But a lot of good things are happening too. The employment figures are encouraging. Our move toward dealing with climate change is encouraging as well. The fact the pharmaceutical companies are going to be held responsible, and the fact that corporations that have had a net profit of $1 billion or more, listen to that closely, net profit of $1 billion or more in the last 3 years, are finally going to have to pay some federal income taxes. Americans are used to paying their fair share of taxes. Why are these corporations making over $1 billion in net profits each year not paying a penny? That's going to change, and it's in the bill too. And I know it's a bone in the throat of my Republican colleagues, but it's only fair. This week we returned after a 4-week recess. I was traveling around my state listening to ideas and concerns. And you know what I heard over and over again? And this is overwhelming, particularly in the area of healthcare, but not exclusively. We just don't have enough people to fill the vacancies and jobs in America. We have roughly 11 million vacancies and 5 million people unemployed. That's the reality. And when it comes to healthcare workers, it's a reality that means the cost of medical care is going up. If you can't find a local nurse to go on staff, on payroll, and be with you for a while, and you have to rely on contract nurses, those come and go, they have all the skill and training, but they're looking for a pretty big paycheck, sometimes 3 times what the regular nurses are receiving. That drives up the cost of health care. And hospitals and clinics are desperate for these nurses to be there. I found all across my state, from the city of Chicago to the smallest town downstate, this is a challenge that we face and need to do something about. But people over and over again, despite what we saw in many of the reports on television, really do still love this country. They're concerned about the divisions we see every single day. America has always been a can-do nation. Faith in the future and in our ability to solve our problems, create a better future, has always been part of American DNA. It's hard to find common ground on scorched earth. As President Lincoln warned us long ago, a house divided against itself cannot stand. A few years later, as the Civil War ended and victory was in sight, President Lincoln pleaded just outside this room in his inauguration with the people of the North and the South, and he said, "We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies." He said that after the deadliest war that America ever experienced. He knew that the work of rebuilding this battered nation and creating a better future could only be achieved if we were united, the United States of America. This week marks the 21st anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attack on America. I'll never forget that day as long as I live. I know, Mr. President, you won't forget it either, because it affected your state and many of the people that live there. Those who are old enough to remember not just the shock and grief of that day, will also remember the intense sense of national unity that sustained us through these terrible days and weeks that followed. We lost so much, but we found a common purpose. We understood that we are one nation, one people, with one destiny. We rise or we fall together. As the Senate returns to the work of legislating, I hope that we will remember Lincoln's plea that we must not be enemies. Politics is not war. It is where we resolve our differences without war in a democracy. People in Illinois are concerned about our state of the economy. They're worried about inflation. I understand that. They're also feeling something many haven't felt for a while, and that's hope. Why? Because of results. Inflation is, in fact, slowing. Gas prices are falling. $3.46 a gallon. I would have grabbed that a few weeks ago, and I hope we can go lower. Gas is down by more than $1.20 a gallon on the average since the start of the summer. Wages are up. People are back at work. We now have more than recovered all the jobs our economy lost in the pandemic. Our economy has added more than 10 million new jobs, including 600,000 manufacturing jobs under President Biden. We're investing in infrastructure. I remind myself over and over again, don't complain if construction on highways just slowed you down. You voted for it, Senator, and I'd vote for it again. President Biden said yesterday, Labor Day, in one of his speeches, that when we make this investment in infrastructure, a record-breaking historic amount, we will have the most modern infrastructure in the world. Now that's what a nation that's prepared to compete does. We passed the CHIPS Act to preserve America's global leadership in research and innovation, and to produce semiconductors and the jobs and industries of the future in America, not in China. As the president also said yesterday, why wouldn't it be in America? We invented the chip. Shouldn't we be leading the world still? Well, with the passage of the CHIPS legislation and a strong bipartisan vote on the floor, we are going to reclaim that lead. We passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which includes the biggest ever investment in climate change and climate resilience. It'll reduce inflationary pressure by cutting energy costs now and in the future, and it also reduced the cost of prescription drugs. We're investing in the American people in the basics of a shared, sustainable economic prosperity. Oh, one footnote that's well worth mentioning. The federal deficit will shrink by $1.7 trillion this year. All of the things that I've mentioned, all of the criticism we hear from the other side of the aisle, and the deficit's going down. Nearly all these economic prosperity proposals were passed with Democratic votes only. CHIPS was an exception, infrastructure an exception, but the American Rescue Plan and the Inflation Reduction Plan were strictly Democratic votes. It's our hope that our Republican colleagues will now join us and help us get back to work in fighting the common challenges facing our nation. On another matter, Mr. President, I'd like to take a moment to speak about one of my highest priorities as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, the confirmation of highly qualified judges. This is one of the great shared successes of President Biden and the Senate Democrats and Republicans who have stood with us on some key votes. As of today, the Senate has confirmed 76 judges to lifetime positions during this 117th Congress. That figure includes Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, outstanding jurist, the first black woman to serve on the United States Supreme Court. I would just say that I've been in politics most of my adult life. I did not appreciate the impact that the selection of this African-American woman would have on the people I represent. Some of the toughest, hardest bargaining African-American women that I know in politics have come up to me and in a moment broken down in tears to thank me for President Biden's leadership and the fact that the Senate approved this new justice. It means that much to them. Her historic confirmation is a crowning achievement in our efforts to build a system of justice that works on behalf of every American. Outside of the Supreme Court, as I mentioned, the Senate has confirmed an impressive number of federal judges, 18 circuit court nominees, 57 district court nominees. Why is that important? Because the vast majority of cases don't make it to the Supreme Court. They're resolved by judges like these nominees at the district and circuit court level. Look at the most recent ruling yesterday in terms of the judge in Florida and the special master that's been appointed for the records that were removed from Mar-a-Lago. That judge made a critical and historic decision. The judges we're approving are in the same position to do that. And with each one of the judges, we've confirmed the American people can trust that they will apply the law to the facts, follow the precedent, and defend the rule of law. Now, these 76 judicial appointments are more than a statistic. With each confirmation, the Senate has taken a crucial step toward ensuring diversity in our federal judiciary. President Biden, Senate Democrats have made it a priority to elevate judicial nominees from demographically and professionally diverse backgrounds. Many times, Republican senators have joined us in this effort, and I want to give them credit where it's due. And during the 117th Congress, we have shattered records when it comes to diversity on the federal bench. Of the 18 circuit judges confirmed by the Senate Democrats, 14 are women and 13 are people of color. And of the 57 district judges we confirmed, 42 of the 57 are women, and many represent historic first. The first Muslim American Article III judge to the first Latina Article III judge in the state of Illinois. We've confirmed a record number of nominees with experience serving not only as prosecutors, but also as public defenders, voting rights experts, civil rights attorneys. For too long, the perspectives that they represent have not been seen on our benches in federal courts. Thanks to President Biden's leadership and the work of the Senate Democrats, the federal judiciary now includes many dedicated public servants who will help bring balance to our nation's courts. And let me quickly add, some of the votes, the key votes, came from a handful of Republican senators who have looked at these nominees in an honest fashion. Every one of these jurists is highly qualified and ready to serve our nation and the American people. That's a welcome shift from the previous administration, which often advanced nominees who simply checked the box Federalist Society. Thankfully, the judges taking the bench under President Biden are impartial and even-handed. All of them have and will continue to administer equal justice under the law. Later today, we will add, I hope, one more name to this impressive roster. The Senate will vote on the nomination of Judge John Lee, who was selected for an Illinois seat on the 7th Circuit. If confirmed, Judge Lee will be the first Asian American judge ever to serve on the 7th Circuit. His confirmation will mark yet another stride toward building a judiciary that reflects the diversity of our nation. Judge Lee was born to Korean parents in Germany. His father was a coal miner. His mother was a nurse. He arrived in America at the age of 4, settled with his family in a one-bedroom apartment in the Albany Park neighborhood of Chicago. It wasn't easy starting off kindergarten in a new land, but Judge Lee said he found the support of a nurturing community of classmates and teachers. He quickly learned English, excelled in school, graduated magna cum laude from Harvard College, cum laude from Harvard Law School. He began his legal career as a trial attorney in the Environment and Natural Resources Division at the Justice Department before working in private practice in Chicago. His practice focused on complex litigation, including antitrust and intellectual property. In 2011, President Obama nominated Judge Lee to be a district court in the Northern District of Illinois. When he was confirmed in 2012 by voice vote, Judge Lee became the first Korean American to serve as an Article III judge in Illinois. Since joining the bench, he's written hundreds of opinions, presided over 35 trials that went to verdict or judgment. He also sat by designation in the Seventh Circuit a number of times, writing several opinions for the majority. During his time on the bench, he's always applied the law to the facts before him in an even-handed and fair fashion. Given his impeccable record and impressive credentials, it's no surprise the American Bar Association has rated John Lee unanimously well qualified for this circuit court position. He has a strong support of myself and Senator Duckworth. I urge my colleagues to join us. I want to close by emphasizing this. Our work is not finished by a long shot. Judge Lee is one of the 10 circuit court nominees awaiting action by the full Senate, and many more are still moving through the committee. Each one of these public servants will bring much needed professional and demographic diversity. The judges being confirmed by this Senate will ensure that the rule of law applies to every single one of us without fear or favor. They will work to uphold America's most sacred promise, equal justice for all. Mr. President, I yield the floor. Suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.